Ancient history is filled with tales of monsters and heroes, gods and demons. We have records of epic battles, cataclysmic events, and creatures that defy imagination. But what if the most terrifying monster isn't one we remember, but one we were forced to forget? This is the story of a presence so horrifying, so fundamentally dangerous, that our ancestors chose not to slay it, but to erase it from existence entirely. It all begins in a forgotten corner of the world, deep within the ruins of a civilization so old it has no name. Archaeologists unearthed a series of clay tablets, not in a grand library, but hidden away, sealed in a lead-lined chamber buried far beneath the main city. These weren't records of kings or harvests, they were warnings. Most of the tablets were fractured, their cuneiform script eroded by millennia. But what could be deciphered sent a shiver down the spine of every researcher who read them. They didn't speak of a beast of flesh and claw, but of something far more insidious. A being that didn't hunger for flesh, but for something much more vital, recognition. The early translations were cryptic. They described a void that walks, a shadow that consumes names. The texts claimed this entity grew stronger, not by being feared, but by being known. Every time its name was spoken, every time its story was told, every time its image was carved, it gained substance. It fed on the very act of being perceived. Imagine that. A predator whose hunting ground is our own consciousness. A monster that becomes real because we know it exists. The tablets paint a grim picture of a world teetering on the brink. As this creature's legend spread, it began to manifest more concretely. First, as a fleeting glimpse in the corner of your eye, then as a whisper in a silent room. Soon, people would vanish, not with a struggle, but simply fading. Their friends and family would slowly forget them, their homes would appear as if they were never lived in, and their names would become meaningless sounds. The creature wasn't killing them. It was unwriting them from the fabric of reality. The civilization that penned these warnings understood the horrifying truth. To fight this thing was to feed it. To raise an army against it was to give it a feast of attention. Any resistance only made it more powerful. They were trapped in a paradox. How do you defeat an enemy that thrives on being known? Their solution was as desperate as it was ingenious. They couldn't kill it, so they had to starve it. They began a global, systematic campaign of erasure. They called it the Great Unremembering. It was an intellectual purge on an unimaginable scale. Artisans who had carved its likeness were forced to destroy their own work and then were silenced. Scribes who had written its name had their hands bound. Storytellers who knew its tales were forbidden from speaking. Every statue was ground to dust, every scroll was burned, every oral tradition was methodically stamped out. But the most difficult part wasn't destroying the records. It was erasing the memory from the minds of the people. The tablets describe complex rituals, psychological techniques designed to make an entire population forget. They use sonic frequencies, psychoactive herbs, and mass hypnotic rites to scour the collective consciousness. It was a self-inflicted cultural lobotomy. They had to sacrifice a piece of their own history, their own identity, to starve the beast that lived within it. Think of the sacrifice involved. They had to willingly forget their neighbors, their leaders, perhaps even family members who had been consumed by this entity. They had to look at an empty chair at their table and force themselves to believe no one ever sat there. It was a war fought not on a battlefield, but in the quiet corridors of the mind, and it almost worked. As generations passed, the creature's name faded into obscurity. Its form became a blur in the collective memory. It began to weaken, to dissolve back into the conceptual void from which it came. It was starved, forgotten, and on the verge of non-existence, but the process was imperfect. Some memories are too stubborn. Some knowledge is too deeply buried to be purged completely. The final generation of this ancient people, before their own civilization collapsed under the strain of their great effort, created one last set of records. The very tablets we found. They knew that one day humanity might stumble upon this forbidden knowledge again, and so they left a final, desperate warning. This brings us to the last, most intact tablet. It was found at the very bottom of the lead-lined chamber, almost as if it was meant to be the last thing anyone ever read. The script is clear, carved with a sense of urgency and dread. It details the nature of the entity, its hunger for recognition, and the catastrophic cost of the great unremembering. It is both a historical record and a dire prophecy. It describes the creature not as gone, but as dormant, sleeping in the vast, silent desert of forgotten things, waiting for a single crumb of recognition to begin feeding again. And then we come to the final lines. The text is a direct address to whoever finds it, a plea across the ages from a people who sacrificed everything. It reads, "We have paid the price of silence. We have scoured our minds and burned our history to grant you this peace." This creature was known by many names, but its true name is, and that's where the next line begins. It's a single, elegantly carved word. A name. The name they work so hard to erase. The name that, if spoken, could awaken the ancient hunger. Beneath that name, the tablet has one last sentence. It's a chilling conclusion, a final, terrifying piece of the puzzle. The clay is cracked and broken right after it, leaving us to wonder what came next. But the words that remain are perfectly clear. They read, "If you learn its name, it will learn yours." We are now the keepers of this knowledge. The archaeologists who translated the text, the academics who studied it, and now you who have heard this story. The creature was forgotten, but it is not gone. It is sleeping, waiting. And we, in our quest for knowledge, may have just rung its dinner bell. The question is, what happens now that we know? Now that we've looked into the abyss, what happens when it starts to look back? The silence that our ancestors bought for us with their own minds is now broken. And we can only wait to hear what answers. Thanks for watching. If you find these dives into the unknown fascinating, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We have many more forgotten histories to uncover. Stay curious, but maybe, just maybe, some things are better left forgotten.